Hello, welcome to the Exploring Open Educational Resources and Adaptive Learning in Chemistry session. Thanks for joining us today. I'm John Britch, a marketing nerd at Knewton, and joining me today are Eric Stano, Senior Director of Content, and Dr. Donna Howell, Associate Professor of Chemistry at Park University. If you have any questions during the session, please type them in the question box and we'll answer them during the Q&A portion or via email after the session. This presentation will be recorded and we'll send you a link to the recording after the session. So now, without further ado, please welcome Eric Stano, Senior Director of Content at Knewton, to talk about OER and adaptive learning.
Hi, thanks very much, John. And John, could you confirm that you're able to see my screen?
I can see your screen.
Fabulous. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the webinar. Again, as John just said, I am Eric Stano. I'm the Senior Director of Content here at Knewton. So without further ado, why don't we just kick it off? And I appreciate everybody spending their time out of what I know are busy days. Let me actually begin talking about the mission of Knewton, as you may have seen on my screen, which I just blew past. What our raison d'etre really is here is to put achievement within reach of all students. And those are students who come to your classes with a diverse array of challenges, levels of preparedness, and what we are driving towards, because we are an adaptive mastery-based platform, we are trying to help all of those students achieve the outcomes that you are legislating for them and that they're aspiring to achieve themselves. And what I have on the screen is just a very small, certainly not comprehensive representation of who all of those students are. And you'll be more familiar with this than I am, although I have some familiarity with it. Full disclosure, I was actually in editorial at Pearson for over 20 years, spent some time in a variety of disciplines, but part of that was developmental education. And I'm familiar, although again, you'll be more familiar with this, I'm familiar with the array of students you're receiving in your classes and are trying to speak to. Those who graduated top of their class 4.0 are ready to move on and have successful careers in college. Those who might have left and come back, those who might have ESL challenges, those who are on the bubble. They are not, in the traditional sense, prepared for college level work. What we're doing through our mastery-based adaptive platform is trying to give you the capabilities of helping all of those students succeed. Let me see if I can actually, there we go. And hopefully, as was implied in my very last comment, we are not purporting or aiming to do all of this without the presence of an instructor. Oftentimes when I talk about the powers of our platform, an instructor will ask me, well, what am I there for? We have developed our capabilities and our content. The content team is what I am at the helm of, but we've developed both with the presumption that there is a talented instructor who is utilizing the platform with their students in a way that's going to help those students achieve those outcomes. It also takes into account, however, the fact that there are adjuncts who might have been hired on a Friday and are beginning to teach class on a Monday. So we've baked that in. But long story short, no matter who is at the helm of the class, but we always presume there is somebody at the helm of a class, we want you as the instructor to be able to teach your way with the confidence that your students are going to be with you. Just some background on who Knewton is. We're a technology startup, but we're not that recent to the game. We started in 2009. We began really as trying to offer traditional instructors, or traditional publishers rather, with the capabilities that made us sort of the Intel inside any of their platforms. We gave them the capabilities to be adaptive in some fashion. We've broken away from the herd on that score because most traditional publishers are on what we'd characterize as an old tech stack. Their technology's been around for the better part of almost 20 years, and it did not allow us to really harness the capabilities that we bring to the table. So we broke away from that. But in the course of having launched, partnered with some institutions and some publishers, what we've been able to do is really develop the platform to make our debut to the marketplace on our own, hopefully a really persuasive one. We've spent over $100 million on our adaptive platform, and through our partnership with a variety of traditional publishers, we've been able to engage with a lot of students, 15 million students. We've provided 28 billion recommendations, and our technology has been in use effectively and as a result across the globe. You've probably heard, because I was one of the people talking about them, among many others, you've probably heard about adaptivity in a variety of contexts and from a variety of publishers or other institutions that are trying to help you serve your students. Just by way of contrast, Knewton's adaptive system is fundamentally different from what others mean when they talk about adaptivity. When others are talking about adaptivity, what they mean is that there's essentially a decision tree. There's a set of pre-baked rules with a limited content pool, and there's no efficacy data, there's no student proficiency data. We have an in-house data science team that helps us really update and iterate to provide the most effective path towards mastery for any individual student, no matter where they're starting when they've engaged with us. So let's talk about what Knewton does, and let's talk about our platform. Our platform is called Alta. That is our fully integrated adaptive learning courseware. And to begin with, not only are we an adaptive platform, but you as instructors are appropriately probably curious about the content that informs that experience. What content have we imbued in the platform? That content comes primarily from, you'll see at the center of your screen, open educational resource providers. We have a partnership with OpenStax out of Rice University, but we also supplement what they provide with a variety of other providers, individual university professor, contributors, our own content team. My team happens to be filled with people who by training are both educators as well as mathematicians, statisticians, etc. And I'll get to this more in a little bit, but one of the conceits we have baked into the use of our platform is no new editions ever. And I am well schooled in the challenges of a publisher saying, well, now we're moving from the second edition to the third edition, and the challenges that you as instructors face in making that transition. Again, I'll get more into this, but what we have baked into our process is the fact that you never need to engage in the process, the work of going from one new edition to another. And I'll explain a little bit more about this, and we're getting to that right here. So as I referenced, we have an in-house data science team. I won't read through this slide, but what that allows us to do is look on a daily basis, and there's no hyperbole in that. It's literally a daily process of looking at how students are performing on individual items. And I have sat in rooms where we look at a particular item and say, hey, 77% of students are flagging on that. Is there something amiss with that particular item? We develop hypotheses around that. We validate those with subject matter experts. And long story short, we iterate based on both those data as well as the feedback we receive from students daily, because every page of the platform has a feedback button. So we are constantly iterating, constantly optimizing the experience that students are having. And what that means for you as the instructors, you don't have to change notes, but you're able to develop at least the trust to know that the platform is always getting better and better and is going to help your students achieve the outcomes, again, that you've laid out for them in an ever more efficient manner. One of the great things about actually having joined Knewton, again, I was at a traditional publisher for 20 years, and another one for the 5 years prior to that, is that Knewton is a technology company. So one of my favorite things that I've heard when I got here was that simple is hard, and they have all here thought about how to make something simple from the outset. Again, I'm all too familiar with the sometimes inscrutable nature of traditional publishers, platforms, etc. So we have made the process, the experience for both instructors and students very, very easy. I've referenced already the fact that we are an adaptive mastery-based experience. What that provides is what you'll see to the right of your screen, which is just-in-time instruction and remediation. We are able to suss out within very few interactions of a student on our platform what it is they're going to need immediately to have that most efficient, effective path towards mastery. So that is really the fulcrum of what Knewton's Alta platform provides, is that just-in-time remediation, again, to get students to the most efficient path towards mastering the outcomes that are set in front of them. And just as sort of a side note, but it really shouldn't be a side note, we also provide seamless integration with any LMS, be it Blackboard, Canvas, D2L, what have you. I am not the person best equipped to walk somebody through that, but I've watched people do it, and I will say again, without hyperbole, that I've seen instructors swoon at the ease of use with their particular LMSs. The very first slide in this deck talked about achievement within reach, and it's actually down to the bottom right as well. Again, that is our driving force, putting achievement within reach of all students. And that means a variety of things. One, that means there's access support anywhere, anytime, support 24 hours a day, any device that a student might have access to or use, they're able to experience Alta in the way that they should, an equivalent experience no matter what device they're using. Down to the bottom of the screen, we are also WCAG 2.0 AA compliant, which is, again, a driving force of us. We don't want to just be able to speak to students who have varying levels of preparedness. We want to give students who have various other challenges that they might bring to your classroom the exact same or the equivalent experience. So if they're visually impaired, hearing impaired, or have other challenges to engaging with course materials, we have reached the level of compliance that will enable them to engage with our platform, our content, etc., in the exact same way as all of their peers. And finally, rounding, I'm going clockwise here, rounding over to the affordable piece of it, we also don't want socioeconomic statuses to be an impediment for students engaging with us. Again, one of the delights of having come from a traditional publisher to Knewton is that the Alta platform is $44 for 2 years of access, and that is by several leagues a much less expensive pathway for them achieving outcomes. I can't tell you how often I was challenged by the assertion, which has the benefit of being true, that course materials from the place that I came from were outpacing the cost of actually enrolling in a course at various institutions. Here, we're down to the $44 level, making it really accessible to virtually any student. So in quick summary, again, what we've done here at Knewton is provide expertly designed technology to make the experience of our platform easy and accessible and navigable by any student or instructor. The content that imbues the platform is, again, from the open educational resource community. My team, just as a side note here, what my team does as the content team, whenever we go into a course area, We look at all of the learning objectives that are taught across the various bestsellers. We research syllabi, etc. We develop a set of learning objectives that essentially comports to the fat part of the bell curve. This is what most people are teaching. And then they curate that content relative to providing the most effective, efficient path towards mastery of a particular objective. An additional side note, for every objective, what you and your students will see is text-based instruction paired with video-based instruction and assessments that we commission and then also offer to the open educational resource community. But we commission those to drive towards the unique symbiosis of that piece of text and that video instruction, again, cognizant of the adaptive frame in which that student is engaging, and again, hopefully providing them with an efficient path towards mastery. I mentioned seamless LMS integration, I mentioned accessibility, and of course, as an extension of accessibility, we're also affordable. We're offering the platform for 2 years at $44. So that is the context of Alta. John, I will stop there and see if any questions have been posed. I'm happy to go deeper into any of these buckets, or that I'm happy to pass it over to one of our fabulous users.
Hi, we have a couple of questions here, Eric. One is, what if there is a learning objective in your platform that is not used in my course? How can I omit that learning objective?
So the learning objectives, whenever you create an assignment, learning objectives are listed within that assignment, and you can simply toggle them on or off. I don't actually have a live version of the platform in front of me, but it is, again, quite literally without hyperbole, the same as turning on or off your Wi-Fi on your phone. The experience looks exactly like that, and it's just that easy. So you can easily click on or off objectives that you don't cover.
Awesome. Another question is, the $44 is a per course charge, not a subscription to all Knewton courses, correct?
That is correct. We also have the option of a monthly subscription, again, per course. So think of if I'm adopting, Stats 1 or college algebra or general chemistry, it is a charge of $44 to the student for that course. They also have the option of paying on a monthly basis $9.95, and because most courses, you're all probably mathematicians, so the math works out there as well.
Awesome. Those are the questions up to this point. So thank you, Eric. And now we're going to turn to Dr. Donna Howell, who is Associate Professor of Chemistry at Park University, where she also serves as the Program Coordinator of Chemistry. So we're going to do a changing of the guard on the presenter rights. And Donna, you should be able to share now. And thank you for coming.
Hi, thanks everyone for being here. Can everyone see my screen now? It should say a beautiful picture of Park University in the background. If you look over to the back left corner, that is the science building, and I'm sitting on the first floor of that building right now. So I'm happy to join you. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a perspective of how I've used Knewton in my courses. I've been using Knewton for a little over a year now. Just to tell you a little bit about me, I have been teaching in higher education as a professor of undergraduate chemistry for over 20 years now, mostly at small universities, both public and private. My class sizes have varied depending on the university, anywhere from about 10 students up to 150 students. Currently, I have been at Park University for 10 years. Park is an open enrollment institution, meaning that obviously if you have a high school diploma, essentially you are admitted to Park University. We consider part of our mission to be transforming lives through accessible, student-centered, quality higher education, and consider higher education a right for all. And so we go into that knowing full well that we will have underprepared student populations, as well as some students that are high performers. I'm particularly interested in the underprepared student population because I was one of those underprepared students. I grew up in an extremely rural part of Oklahoma, and my high school did not offer chemistry as a student. And when I went to college, professors took a very personal approach to making sure I succeeded, and that has been a great influence in my life. So the two courses that I've utilized Knewton for are a standard GOB course, CH 105. This is mainly populated by our nursing majors as well as our fitness and wellness majors, although it does also satisfy the liberal education requirement for a science with a lab course for any major on campus. And the second course is a standard general chemistry first semester course that our pre-professional majors, biology and chemistry majors take. Both of those are pretty standard courses. Different levels of preparedness in both, but both tend to have a bit of a bimodal distribution as far as preparedness. Both courses require intermediate algebra or higher as a prerequisite, so we assume no pre-knowledge of chemistry, very little preparedness in math. Essentially, a high school level algebra course is what we assume. To give you a little bit about the demographics of Park University, our average student age is a little higher than most. We are located on the Parkville, Missouri campus with approximately 1,500 students, but we also have campus centers in 41 different areas of the United States, and our students represent countries, over 100 different countries of origin. We have a large military population, and so the age of our student tends to be a little above the traditional 18 to 24-year-old. Particularly in the CH 105 course, because of the nursing focus, we tend to get a few more adult learners in there as well. As I said, being an open enrollment institution means that some students are always going to be better prepared than others. To kind of get an idea, last semester in my CH 105 course, I gave the American Chemical Society General or GOB course as a pre-evaluation to see kind of where they were located. If we just focus on the blue lines on the slide here, you can see that I have some students that were in the 92nd percentile and others in general chemistry that were below the 10th percentile. And so the little blue lines here indicate the general chemistry, and you can see they were across the board very different in preparation level. So it becomes quite a challenge to address those that are under that 10th percentile in previous chemistry knowledge with those that are in the 92nd percentile of the general chemistry information. So how do I address this? Well, that's where Knewton Alta came to the rescue. First off, I want to speak to the instructional content. Yes, it is based on the OER. However, I found it to be on par with the industry-leading textbooks that you'll see out there. It's different in that the learning objectives are chunked into smaller, more palatable amounts for the learner and supported by these short video components. Someone was asking about turning on and off learning objectives earlier. This is a screenshot here to the right of when you create an assignment. You give it a name, you choose your due date, your available date and your due date, and down below here you can see for this particular segment of the course, I can choose just by clicking this little blue button whether to turn those two learning objectives on or off, and then just hit create. What I found is while I'm also going through this, I can preview as a student and see exactly, both from an instructional level and from an assessment level, the type of material the student will see. I found that very helpful to align my teaching so that the two agree with each other. Integration with the LMS, we particularly use Canvas on our Parkville campus. My LMS manager has said this is the easiest integration he's ever done. He sat in my office and spoke through a webinar to several teammates at Knewton, and they spoke some other language I didn't understand, but it seemed very easy. But I can say from an instructor's point of view that the students don't actually even feel like they're leaving the Canvas environment. It records their grades directly into the Canvas grade book. So there's very little maneuverability, or not maneuverability, but very little confusion with the students between that. The feedback button is available on every page. It takes an automatic screenshot of whatever I'm looking at and sends it directly to the support team if I find a mistake or have a suggestion for an improvement or so forth. I always get feedback within 24 hours, usually even faster. So how do I use this? I use both the mastery assignments and the test function in my classroom. I use the mastery assignments as a formative assessment. I encourage the students to read the related instruction prior to beginning the assignment. There they can go through the reading materials, the short videos. There are some little questions to kind of guide them along to test their knowledge before they actually begin the mastery assignment. And then once they feel confident in that, they work through the objectives through the mastery assignment and remediation for both conceptual misunderstandings and mathematical errors, going as far back down and as addition and subtraction problems to about 5th grade can go in there. As an instructor, I found myself prior to this spending a lot of time having to teach students how to rearrange an algebraic equation rather than spending time on chemistry concepts. With Knewton, I can actually spend less time on the algebra. That way I'm spending more time on the chemistry concepts. I'm also not boring those at the higher end of the mathematical preparedness spectrum. And so I actually can get more coverage in the same lecture time. The students in the mastery assignments receive immediate feedback with very thorough explanation as to how the problem is solved. There's enough questions that I don't have to worry about one student going through and working on the problems and sharing with another student, because typically the students don't even see the same questions. If they do, it's by sheer coincidence. So that's the mastery assignments. The test portion, I use the testing function for quizzes as a summative assessment where they are either short answer or multiple choice. The students are encouraged to complete all the mastery assignments in a chapter before they attempt the quiz. And then, unlike in the mastery assignments, the only feedback given at the end of the quiz is the overall score until after the due date for the quiz, so that I can take care of any issues of students sharing answers or anything in that. So you may be asking yourself then, what is the student time investment here? Because of course, we know they're going to take that into consideration and let you know if they're spending more than they think is a reasonable amount of time. The average mastery assignment over 1 to 3 learning goals takes my students anywhere from about 15 to 40 minutes, depending on their level of knowledge of the material. That includes the time to go through the reading materials and the related instruction. I assign approximately 5 to 6 mastery assignments per chapter, and so that works out with somewhere between 2 to 4 hours per week that the students are interacting outside of class with the materials. I think that's a fairly reasonable amount of time for a 5-hour course. The quizzes, there are approximately 10 questions, and their average time is about 25 minutes on those, again, depending on how familiar with the material the students are. So it's not an extremely taxing amount of time on the students, but it does take a little longer for those that may need a little more remediation. As far as how this figures into my grading plan, the mastery assignments and quizzes make up about 40% of my course grade. Kind of 60% then, of course, is the lecture exams and the lab component. The mastery assignments are based on a completion grade only. So Knewton Alta sort of defines what a minimum grasp of the material should look like. And once a student has achieved that, they'll see a little bar at the top of the screen moving towards progress of mastery. And so that automatically records in my grade book as a completed score for the assigned amount of points. The quizzes are objective scores, and so of course they are scored as right or wrong, and they're either multiple choice or short answers, and that automatically records in my grade book as well. The benefits to the students are a lot in terms of how much time they're spending engaged with the material. It also benefits the instructor in that I can tell how the students are doing with that material on both an overall class basis and on an individual basis. So I can look at the dashboard for a given assignment. You see sort of one of the page shots of one of my courses here. I can see how many students have completed, how many are in progress, how many are struggling, how many have not started yet, approximately the average completion time. And I can look through the number of questions correct and incorrect. I can go through the amount of time the average student is taking. And so I can detect specific learning objectives that I need to go back and revisit in the lecture that they're just not getting. I can also see over here to the left side of the screenshot when a student is struggling. And so I can go further into that student's score or actual assignment and see the specific questions they're missing, what instruction have they received, is there a way that I can help them on a more effective basis. So I also get about a weekly to every 3 or 4 days email noting any challenging learning objectives for the whole class and which students are struggling. And so I can go in and look particularly and see how they're struggling. So I can hone in on the exact part of the learning objectives that they're not clear on. And so that really focuses my student interactions. So does it work? Well, last fall, this is an email I received from the Knewton staff. Over on the left-hand side is a breakdown of where my class kind of started, and you can see that this started with about 60% struggling, about 7% advanced, and the rest kind of average, which pretty well agreed with what I was seeing on the ACS exam. So this is just based on their performance on the first few learning objectives and first few mastery assignments. Over time, at mid-semester, we can see how they have improved on reaching mastery with the advanced students. All of the students, 92%, were reaching mastery by that point, with an improvement of the struggling students being the largest percentage point improvement over time. So we're really attacking those underprepared students and bringing them up to the same mastery level as the advanced and the average students as well. So that was quite encouraging to see. The last thing I want to talk about is actually working with Knewton. I can't say that I've ever worked with a more professional group of people than working with Knewton, and I've worked with lots of publishing companies before, of course. It is a learning curve a little to get used to this, although the program is pretty straightforward. But when I first started using it, I needed a little hand-holding, and so the technical support was there through web conferences and phone calls and emails on demand. As I said, my LMS manager had a few questions. Those were addressed immediately. It's just been a real pleasure to work with everyone there. There have been some issues, both in some questions and some of the related materials that I have had some concerns about, and I've clicked on that feedback button that's always in the bottom left corner of the screen, and I get a response within minutes, and any adjustments that need to be made are usually made within 24 hours. So a lot of times my students don't even know that existed in the first place. If you look in the literature, there's not a lot of information about how adaptive learning is effective in chemistry, and so I'm actually piloting a research project right now, and I've worked with some of the data scientists at Knewton to help define my research questions, and obviously to get some feedback on how my students are doing. And it's just been exceptional. They've been an exceptional team to work with, always professional, always friendly. It's just been a real pleasure. So I think I'll wrap it up there and then ask if there are any questions for me. And thank you again for all listening. John?
Okay, someone asked the question, what if there's a learning objective that they have that's not covered in the Knewton course? Can you add? I think just from the outset, it will probably be hard to find something that's not in there given the amount of content that you would find in a Knewton course, since it needs to be much greater than what you'd find in your standard textbook. But Donna, have you found topics that haven't been covered that you've wanted to cover?
Actually, I have not at this point. Pretty much everything I wanted to cover and more has been in some way presented. I have presented slightly different ways of some things, but the concepts have all been in there.
And John, I'll jump back in at this point too. One of the things that we have done on my team over the last couple of months is to do a correlation of our courses and our learning objectives with all the existing best-selling textbooks that are out there, to divine if there are any gaps that we might be filling. And we've identified some, and we're actually filling those, and they'll be filled. One of the breathtaking things about being at Knewton is how quickly things happen. Those will be filled by April of this year. And if we receive, we actually have also a posture of wanting to receive feedback from customers for X, Y, or Z topic. We're able to respond to that. It goes back to the both data-driven and feedback-driven nature of what we do. So we are able, long story short, we are able to fill learning objectives if you identify one that is not covered. We're able to do that on the fly, again, without making you need to go to a new edition. We can just start folding it in.
Awesome. Are there any other questions that you would like us to answer? Please type them in the chat box. This is the last call for questions.
And while there's a last call for questions, and I'll give people the opportunity to type for a minute or so, the one thing that I'm not sure we did cover, and since this is the chemistry session, I think it's an important point to make, is that one of the great things about our content is, one, the nature of the prerequisites that we offer to students. So if a student is flagging on a particular objective, we can suss out what that student is struggling over that might be something that would scaffold up to that objective. We can offer them that practice because we have both inter and intra-domain recommendations that we're able to provide, again, in the context of being an adaptive mastery-based platform. But what has particular bearing on this session is the fact that for a chemistry instructor, or for a chemistry student rather, if they are working towards an objective and we can identify that they're actually tripping over some mathematics that actually undergirds that student's ability to achieve that objective, we can offer the math seamlessly. The practice comes up, it's not a lot of hand waving, but the students are able to actually get that mathematics background in the form of what we call booster assignments. So there is some agency that's built into that. But long story short, if any of your instructors or any of you feel like half the time you're an algebra instructor, we're able to actually provide that support and remediation so that you don't have to be teaching algebra.
Wonderful. So we thank you, Eric, and thank you, Donna. We are at time now. So I just want to say, if we have not answered your question, we will answer any lingering questions via email, as well as send you a link to the recording. You can also visit www.knewtonalta.com. There you can leave a question if one comes to you after this session. You can also request a demo or get access to an instructor preview account. Anyway, thank you again for coming, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.